You're listening to BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon. It is The Bigger Picture and it's Mira Silva. So the Oxbridge is the ultimate educational goal that many parents set for their children. It is the pedagogical holy grail. Now, in the UK, parents spend thousands of pounds in school fees and private tutors to give their offspring a crack at Oxbridge. Do many Malaysians have such aspirations? And if they do, should prospective candidates be dissuaded from applying to Oxbridge in fear of being surrounded by snobs? I mean, that is a reputation that they tend to have. Now, in the second part of our monthly Oxbridge Reach Out series, we catch up with Emma Davidson, who's the secretary of the Oxford and Cambridge Society of Malaysia. How are you today, Emma?
Very well, thank you.
Emma, as a British living in Malaysia, I mean, what do you think are some local misconceptions linked with Oxford and Cambridge universities?
Well, I think you've identified it in the introduction. I think the first one is they think that it's going to be very snobby there. There'll be a lot of rich people, maybe a lot of prejudiced people there. There are actually 59% of the students there from the UK come from government schools, from maintained schools. Mm-hmm. So that means more than half, although only about 10% of UK children actually go to private schools. So it is disproportionately in favour of the private fee-paying schools, but still over half will be from maintained schools when you get there. There's some interesting stats. A third of the students there at Oxford and Cambridge come from just 100 schools. And
in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And Eton and Westminster send 100 each a year, usually. So there are little pockets, but there are enough state kids to sort of balance it out. And then you get kids like I was, who actually went through state schools their whole education and then switched for their A-levels. So, you know, I would be under the statistics of being from a fee-paying school, but actually my whole education was in a government school.
Right. Why is there a bias? Would you say it's a bias towards private schools?
I think the main reason is that they're better prepared for the interview process, the application, the way that they should be approaching it. The whole way through their education, if they've been in fee-paying schools, maybe the standard of education has been higher, so it's maybe easier to get there. But at the end, that tail end bit, it comes down to two things: preparing for the application, the interview, there are extra exams and papers that you have to do, preparing for those. But the first hurdle for most people is just having the expectation that you should go, that you can go, that you're allowed to go, and that you should try. And I think for a lot of people, they won't even think. For myself, you know, I was exactly the same. You wouldn't even think about applying.
So what made you change your mind?
I changed schools. I couldn't do the A-levels I wanted. I went to a pretty grim, comprehensive school between two council estates.
Which you wouldn't have had much of a choice now, would you?
No, I think I would have been lucky if I'd gone to any university. And then my parents remortgaged the house. They used some of my inheritance money, and they sent me to a private school to do my A-levels. And at the end of the first year, they used to organise trips to go to Oxford and Cambridge to look round it, because the choice was not whether you're going, it's which one do you want to go to. So they would take you on a trip to both. And I didn't put my name down to go on the trip. And my teacher said, well, why is your name not on this list? And I said, well, why should it be on the list? And he said, because you're one of our top candidates for next year, so put your name down. But I was the same person I was just a year earlier. And it's just the expectation. And that's what the Oxbridge Society in Malaysia is trying to do, is to encourage those people who should be going, who have the ability, but they just don't have the confidence to do it yet.
Right. What was it that, why was it that you felt, Emma, that you didn't have it, or you were not cut out for Oxford or Cambridge? Is it because it was academics, or the elite, the fact that, Oxford and Cambridge are always linked to the elitist? What was it?
It never even crossed my mind. It wasn't something I thought about and dismissed. It's just that some schools are great at pushing their children to have the highest possible expectations of themselves. And that's what private schools do, I think. They make the children believe in themselves and push them to the very best that they can.
It's not all about academics now, is it?
Well, they like to say that it's not. I mean, for example, in my O-levels, I only got 6 A's, 2 B's and 2 C's. But from the school I went to, that was quite good. So it's not, you don't have to have a string of straight A's. For Oxford and Cambridge, the offers will be 3 A's or 3 A stars. and 98% of the kids that got into Cambridge last year got A, star plus, star plus.
Wow.
So that's what they did achieve.
Okay. All right. So it's not a string of A's, but the minimum.
It's really important.
Right, of course.
But
And
they make exceptions. They try to look at the background that somebody's had. Have they gone to a difficult school? Have they had to move schools? Have they had a break in their education because they were ill? I mean, they try to be fair. It's harder for them to be fair to Malaysian students because they don't understand the schools that we have.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what made you change your mind?
What, whether to go?
Yes.
It was only because when you go there and you look at them, they're just the most beautiful places, both of them. And you just get this incredible vibe and buzz that if you have an opportunity to go, no one should ever turn that opportunity down because they're incredible places. Mm-hmm. And they're such fun. I mean, we went in the summer and people were boating and rowing and picnicking and lounging around on college gardens. Incredible.
Right. And then, but did it help that the school, had that confidence in you?
Oh, without it would be impossible. So if you don't get that from your school, you have to get that from your parents.
Right. Okay. And is it tough for international students to be accepted in Oxbridge?
The stats would say yes, in a way. For example, if you look at, say, maths, I mean, we think of Malaysian students as being very good at maths and engineering. 8% of Malaysians who applied to Oxford for maths got accepted, 8%. Whereas if you look at all the maths applications, 15% got accepted. So we are below par. You look at economics, the subject that I did and that I do the mock interviews in, 4.2% of Malaysians got accepted to do economics at Oxford. Of all the applications, that's 8%.
Okay. So in any one intake, Emma, how many people or how many students would be Malaysian? Approximately.
Well, actually, Cambridge is doing better than Oxford, dare I say that. For that, there are about 210 this year, Malaysians in Cambridge, and it's about 50-odd have been accepted this year in Oxford.
Okay.
So the tragic thing is that for Oxford, the number in the last 7 years applying from Malaysia has doubled, but the number actually being offered places has remained relatively stable.
Okay. Why the difference, Emma? 210 as opposed to 80. That's a huge difference.
I think it's partly because Cambridge come here to do interviews, whereas in Oxford you either have to go to Oxford. Obviously, that's a financial burden for a lot of people, or you can do a Skype interview.
Right. Okay, then. So, I mean, you are, very much involved in the whole application process, mock interview process at Oxbridge, right? Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, many people say the interview questions are off the wall, Emma, but they are to encourage, of course, lateral thinking and, to find out how legitimate you are to a certain extent. But they are provoking candidates to show how they think and not really what they know. So how should one actually prepare for this interview?
It's very hard to prepare.
I'm sure. I mean, it's bizarre questions. Cambridge, for an example. What books are bad for you? For those going to, the English stream. Why does French food interest you? Modern and medieval languages is, what they ask you. Oxford, will the bag ever become empty for mathematics? So it is bizarre. It sounds bizarre.
A lot of it is they're looking at your thought process and how you would tackle a problem or a question. And it's not a question of a right or wrong answer. Sometimes they will give you snippets of information and then see how you take on board that information and run with it and process it. And what they're really testing in the interview is your tutorability. So the famous thing about Oxford and Cambridge is they have tutorials where you'll just be you and your tutor on your own or two of you. And they want to see how able you are to have a logical thought process. And that's what these questions are testing.
How did you manage them?
Well, we had sessions at school where we discussed these, and we had lunchtime discussion groups where we'll take one. I think on my general paper there was some question, something like what came first, the mouse or the mountain? And actually don't ask me the answer now because I can't remember, but you're kind of coached on how to approach these.
Right.
But if somebody is bright and they're well read, and they have a stab at this, they'll be able to see that flash of genius coming out.
Right.
So the good schools here already do lunchtime sessions like KTJ and KYUEM. They will get their students together months beforehand and have little brainstorming groups where they can practice these arguments.
Would you say the interview process is the most difficult?
It depends on the person. So if you're not so keen on doing exams, then, having this pressure on you of knowing, I need to get 3 A stars, it's handling that pressure is very difficult. It's nerve-wracking. And I think it's if you are from a state school, when you go to these beautiful, big, 500-year-old buildings and you're sat outside a room staring at the other candidates, you can get very intimidated. Yes. And it's a lot about keeping your confidence just before you go in.
Right. And I understand this whole mock interview process is part of the CSR initiative of the Oxbridge Society. Could you tell me more about the initiative?
Yeah, it's something that's becoming increasingly important to us. The society's changed the last few years, and we're pushing a lot more our corporate social responsibility activities. And the main one is that through Maybex Society, what we do is schools will ask Maybex to help them do mock interviews. Maybex will then contact our society members, and we will go and conduct a mock interview with their applicants.
Sure. Maybex meaning?
Malaysian British Education Cooperation Society.
All right.
So MABECS.
Sure. So they work with you to sort of organise these mock interviews,
they do. Dato Richard Small at Maybex is one of our members, so he gets in touch with us. And we've got lawyers, economists, mathematicians, engineers, English grads, and we do these mock interviews.
Okay. Coming up, we'll find out more about the application process to Oxbridge on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
You're listening to BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon. It is The Bigger Picture and it's Mira Sivasodi. We're on our series for the Oxbridge Reach Out program. We're trying to prepare potential students for Oxbridge, and with me is Emma Davidson. She's the secretary of the Oxford and Cambridge Society of Malaysia. Now, Emma, are the questions asked in these mock interviews sort of similar to the ones that will be asked during the real selection process?
Yes, we try very hard to make them mirror as close as possible, because that's the whole point, that we don't want them to be surprised by anything. Each tutor will obviously have their own style of interviewing, so it won't be perfect because each interview is different. The way it will go usually, and this is what the Oxford in particular is very helpful at telling us about their interviews. Cambridge this year, I asked them for a bit more information, and they didn't want to talk about it. But there's a lot of stuff on their websites about the interview. So what happens is the first couple of minutes will just be general questions to warm you up and to relax you. And then they will spend maybe 3 minutes asking you, 4 minutes asking you about your A-levels, why do you want to go to Oxford or Cambridge, something that should be relatively easy to answer. Then the bulk of it, at least 20 minutes, 25 minutes, will be some sort of academic debate.
Okay.
That could come from something that you've said in your personal statement. So you maybe said that you've done some research and you believe that the euro will collapse. Well, then they'll start talking to you about the euro. You'd be expected to show some of your theory that you've learnt as well, but your knowledge must be beyond your A-level syllabus.
Okay.
And it must mean that you've done some research, some independent thought of your own. Or it could be that they will give you, for example, economics, the ones that I know about. You may get a graph and you have to explain what this is. So interest rates change. What's the effect on the graph now? And why did you do this? And what's the maths equation for that? So it may be very technical, or it may be based on something that you've said in your personal statement.
Sure.
Maybe it's a book that you've said that you've read and were impressed with, and then they'll discuss the book that you've read.
Right. Taking into account our education system and how it's sort of based, I can imagine Malaysian students facing many challenges at this mock interviews. How could you share some of those challenges with me?
Yeah, I think, this is why the mock interviews we do are so important. You are sat down, if it's a Cambridge guy and they've come here, you'll be sat down one-to-one with a European, sometimes a woman, and for some people that's unnerving. That alone is a hurdle to get over. What they do like to do, especially for the arts subjects, is to play devil's advocate. They want to see you debate and challenge and they'll put a point to you and you have to process it and then argue back with them.
Right.
And this idea in Malaysia, which is lovely, that people respect their elders, doesn't work in the interview.
We don't have an opinion.
You have to contradict them and you have to give your own opinion. Yeah.
Okay, and that is basically the challenge. Huge
It
challenge.
is.
What about
It
language, Emma? I can imagine language is a huge obstacle as well.
It is. I mean, you have to do your IELTS exam if you're from outside the UK. So certain people do, yeah. You'll need to do your IELTS. So you have to even pass that exam first. But in the interview itself, for the arts subjects, the requirement is obviously a lot higher. There have been rumours about sometimes in the maths interviews, they basically say hello and then they'll give you a piece of paper and you scribble away and there's not a lot of speaking done.
Right.
But if you're interested in something like economics or in law, even engineering, you will be expected to have a good command of English.
Okay. So how do you select these interviewees? Do they come forward for these mock interviews? Do they have to apply for it?
No, they come from the schools. So the schools will look at their students and work out who they think will be possible candidates. They will then approach Maybex. A few come direct to us, but most of them go through Maybex. Maybex will then line them up.
Okay. And how long have you been organising these mock interviews? Is it a recent development?
Oh, no, it's quite a few years, but it's definitely getting more important and bigger.
Sure.
Yeah.
How's the response been?
Oh, good. I mean, I think the schools have to persuade some candidates not to go for it. I think there are more out there that want to do this, and the schools say, well, we really don't think you stand a great chance.
Sure. So you work closely with the schools then to give them feedback of the
Maybex
mock
do. Yeah,
interviews?
we give very detailed feedback. So I will give feedback to the candidate and also to the college. We fill a form in and it's quite detailed.
Okay, so once this happens, potential interviewees, if they are potential candidates, what happens? Do they go on with the application process?
Yep. So they've already submitted their UCAS by the time we interview them or just about ready to submit it. For Oxford and Cambridge, the form has to be in early on the 15th of October. They will then hopefully get called for a real interview. I mean, we have no influence whatsoever on whether they get called for a real one. And then they will do their real interview. And then both universities have a series of tests that you have to do as well as the interview, in addition to the personal statement. So you'll go through that process. You will finish that by about early December.
After which?
Then you'll wait for a few very nerve-wracking weeks before they... When I was waiting for mine, and I was expecting it a certain day, and the letter didn't come, and I sort of accosted the postman, and I said, check your bag. And my father had to go out and apologise on my behalf. The next day it came.
Is there anything, Emma, that you wished you had known before you actually went through the whole process?
No, I think I was well informed. Okay. I think my school was good. We sent 5, 6, 8, something like that every year to Oxford and Cambridge. Was well informed, and I think that's the gap that Oxbridge Society Malaysia is trying to fill.
Okay.
For those kids who need that advice.
How long have you been involved with the Oxbridge Society of Malaysia?
Started about 7 years ago with the rowing. So my father-in-law told me that the Oxford Cambridge Society, he has a boat race, and I rowed at school and at university, but actually it was a drinking boat race. It wasn't a rowing boat race. But then they started one about 7 years ago, and we started on the lake gardens in our little sampan doing Hawaii 5-0. And it was great. But now we have proper rowing boats. We have 4 Cox 4 boats that are kept at Putrajaya, and they're used by a couple of government schools in Putrajaya for rowing. So it's great. We've advanced incredibly on the rowing.
Okay, it's interesting because, the BFMers, a few of us came for the Oxbridge dinner the other day. And what I found interesting is most of your members are foreign. They're not really Malaysian.
Well, actually, most of our members are Malaysian. And this is something on the EXCO. I've been on the EXCO for about 4 years now. We debate this a lot. It's a certain core, maybe 60 members who come to lots of things. And yes, a lot of them are foreign, but most of our members are not. So the challenge is, how do we get more of our members out?
Right. Do you know why the Malaysians don't actually come forward and participate in these programs?
I don't, and I think we're trying to do a wider range of activities. For example, this Saturday we have a Guy Fawkes party, which is a family bonfire and fireworks celebrating this Guy Fawkes festival that they have in the UK. So we're trying to get more family events. Maybe because some of our events involved alcohol, maybe that put some people off. But we have some good speaker events. The BFM event was excellent, and that was oversubscribed very quickly.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we need more BFM events. That's what we need.
The society also has mentoring programs in Sabah. You do a lot of CSR initiatives. Could you share that with me?
Okay, that one is a new one. That's from an ex-KTGS student called Jin Ho, who is now at Cambridge on their student body. And he did a fantastic project which we're supporting. It's just started. He basically had 2 sessions in Sabah where he got about 200 students and he explained to them what Cambridge is and how you apply. They were Form 4 and 5 students, so they were a bit too young for us. But we've got about a dozen members who've said, yeah, I'll coach them, I'll mentor them. So it'll be a bit different to the mock interviews. The mock interviews, we get involved quite late on. The Sabah project, when Jinho gets students who are actually going to apply, they'll then be assigned an Oxbridge member who will then give them advice on the kind of things they need to be doing outside their studies, what they should be reading, doing mock interviews with them.
Right.
Because over there, they're going to need a lot more help from us because they're probably not going to get it from their schools.
Okay, I'm just wondering why you haven't gone on a big scale to all schools in Malaysia. I mean, we've got a whole lot of international private schools just here in the Klang Valley, actually.
I mean, the private schools here, the international schools here, already approach us through Maybex. So, you know, this year I've been to Help and Taylor's and we've been to Alice Smith. They're already kind of doing it a little bit. The good schools will have members of staff who've been to Oxford and Cambridge, so they've got a bit of a head start. Why don't we do government schools? I think a lot of it is just resources. You know, we all work and we do this voluntarily, and it's just a time commitment. Yeah.
Are there many Oxbridge societies around the world?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Thailand is massive. Thailand's very big. Singapore's very big.
Wow.
Yeah.
So many Thais the number of Thais in Oxbridge is much higher than Malaysians.
I think it was helped by the PM going to Oxford. That maybe gave it a bit of a boost.
Okay. Our PM went to Nottingham University.
Did it?
So yeah.
They've got a good alumni here.
Yes,
too.
they do. And they've got a campus here. Both Oxbridge and Cambridge are desperate, Emma, to shed this impression that they are pro-private schools or elitist, especially in the UK. Do you think it's the best move?
I think it has to be. I mean, partly sort of politically funding. Now Britain is trying to pretend that it's a sort of a class society and things. So they really need to shed that image. They know that they're trying to do that. They have their own outreach programs where they go to school. I mean, St Anne's College, Oxford's very good at coming here, for example. They do similar things in the UK. So they do have programs where they go to schools, but they are now quite transparent about what the interview is, what the application process is. So if you go to both university websites now, they have a huge amount of information on what the interview is. I mean, Oxford even has some podcasts of, interviews and the kind of questions and how someone answers them.
Right.
So they're trying to be very transparent. They're trying to sort of take the fear and uncertainty away. Yeah.
Which is really
Not
a good
sure
thing.
if it's working.
But, in the UK, it was interesting to read that there's a mini industry that has developed, offering advice, tips and support through the whole application process. It is a big industry, isn't it?
Well, so much rides on it.
Yeah.
I mean, if
you're doing it for free here.
We are doing it for free here.
you're
There
doing
are
it for
plenty fee-paying ways to get this information. There are lots of websites and things offering help. Yeah.
Oh, trust me. Just go on it. 20 books you have to read, 30 books that you must read.
Yeah.
It's the works out there. I mean, how do you differentiate who's really genuine and who isn't?
In the interview.
Okay.
I mean, someone who says that they've read a book, but actually they've only read the introduction and the conclusion, when you talk to them about the book, you will know.
Okay.
And Malaysians are so wonderfully honest. The students are just so lovely. They quite often say, well, actually, I didn't read the whole thing. Just, oh, God, you're not supposed to say that. They can't bear to lie about it. Yeah.
there is a certain amount of lying that goes into it. You know, Emma, you're here in Malaysia. You chose teaching as your profession, and you hold the University of Cambridge's diploma in English language, teaching to adults. How do you find it here, teaching children?
Well, I teach adults during the week and children at the weekend, and lovely. I mean, I used to be in insurance, and it's so much more soul-fulfilling than insurance. I mean, at the British Council, it's like the United Nations. We have so many nationalities, and the students are just wonderful. They're highly motivated. And then at the weekends, we have predominantly Malaysian students, and they're just lovely. I mean, those that come from overseas, particularly from the UK, they come, Malaysian children are lovely. They're so polite and hardworking.
They are, but don't know whether they make the cut for Oxbridge because of that, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know, I mean, this is the perfect child would be one that has this sort of politeness and you know, you can say to a Malaysian child, sit down and do that for half an hour, and you know, they'll do that. I mean, you know, their concentration span, their dedication, ability to work is just fantastic. If you can also, on top of that, and it has to come from the schools or from the parents, some way of broadening their knowledge, just getting their head out of the books sometimes, that would be a perfect student.
You know, I think, we have a very poor reading culture in Malaysia. Where we sort of read by heart everything from, you know, textbooks, but we don't read beyond that. I think that is something we should really start with.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no excuse, because the number of bookshops that we've got here and you know, books are not that expensive here.
Well, they are actually, Emma. If you look in comparison, I think books are a little expensive, and that is one of the problems. Sort of stops children from, you know, going out and reading more.
I mean, schools, I don't know what the state of most school libraries are, but they're not generally great. I mean, it's a shame. You know, the British Council used to have a very good library. But now I think books are quite accessible. I think for most families, you can always find a book if you really want one.
Yeah, I mean, it's priority, isn't it?
Well, it is, and having the ability to read something that's not just a tiny blog or a snapshot of something or a YouTube video that, you know, it's something a bit longer. Yeah. But, you know, I grew up listening to the Today programme in the UK on Radio 4, which is, you know, it's a bit like BFM. They talk about news and business and interviews and things. And that's what got me interested in these things. So it doesn't have to necessarily start with a book, but yes, at some stage, books and articles and magazines.
Gets your interest going. Yeah. Besides the Sabah CSR initiative, are you on to anything else?
Yeah, this year, in May this year, we started a new project. It's called the Oxbridge KTJ Debating Forum. And the idea is to give students an intellectual taster of the debate and the intellectual rigour that they will have if they go to Oxford or Cambridge. So we had 160 students, aged 14 and upwards, come to KTJ. We had 13 Oxbridge members, which was a great commitment from the society to mentor groups of students, and then they came back and they had a debate, and it was a great success. So we got them debating on stage. So we're going to do that again. The next one is the 20th of April, and it's for top Malaysian and international schools.
Okay, so 20th April 2013.
Yep.
All right, and the website to get more information?
Just email me.
Okay, so that's secretary at
oxbridgemalaysia.com.
Fantastic. And, you know, just to conclude, Emma, I forgot to ask you your experience in Oxford. How was it?
Oh, it was fun. It was fun. I was asked this question last night, actually, when I was doing some mock interviews at KTJ. And, you know, my first thought when you say Oxford was how fun it was, how enjoyable it was. And then, of course, I have to remember that I was there to study at the same time.
Of course. Yeah. Was it difficult, you know, having that balance? Or was the environment conducive for that?
It's conducive because there's a lot of support and everything is right there. You know, because you live in your colleges and they're lovely collegiate, very sort of paternal organisations, that everything you need is right on your doorstep. So time-wise, it's quite efficient. I think the hardest thing when you go, particularly here for Malaysian students who are so competitive academically, when you get there, you realise you're not top of the class. Right. You've gone the whole way through your academic career and you've been number one, and suddenly you get there and you're not. That's tough.
Sure. And was it a culture shock when you first went in there?
No, I think it was okay. I think it was
I suppose being British yourself, it was a lot easier for you.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think it depends on the college that you go to. I mean, some of them prefer to keep their traditions a lot stronger than other ones. So, for example, when we only wore the gown and the cap when we had formal dinners, which are a couple of times a term, whereas other colleges, you must wear them for every meal.
Right.
That kind of thing would be a bit strange.
Okay.
But mine was a very old, small, informal college.
Right. You know, Emma, what's your advice to students who want to be a part of Oxbridge?
I think the main thing is academically, yes, you have to be excellent, but it's so much more than that. I think you have to get your head out of your books. You need to start reading things from an early age. You can't cram this kind of passion for your subject in the last year. You have to build it up over a number of years if you're really that interested in it. If you want to do engineering, you have to take things apart, play with them, work out how things work. And start looking at the bigger picture instead of just your studies.
How do we get in touch with you at the Oxbridge Society?
Secretary at oxbridgemalaysia.com.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Emma Davidson, the Secretary of the Oxford and Cambridge Society of Malaysia, in our Oxbridge Reach Out program on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
BFM 89.